Pompey marches into Jerusalem. We looked at him a little bit ago. 63 BC. The Zealots, during the early years of the Roman rule, they appeared in Palestine. Some say they were Pharisees who said, we want our political freedom and we're willing to fight for it. Josephus, again, gives a little bit of a different picture. He says that sect was formed in AD 6 when a Judas the Galilean and a Pharisee named Zadok rebelled against Rome. Wherever the origin is, when you think of a zealot, think of kind of a political fanatic. And it doesn't have to be, not in a bad sense of that word, these people were just, now, how does that impact the ministry of Jesus? So let's think for a minute. Jesus does a miracle, and then what does he tell the people who saw it? Don't say anything. Don't tell anybody. See, Jesus knew the timetable that his Father had set for him, and he didn't want to be pressured politically into leading some kind of a revolt. Well, the Zealots were very interested in that. They wanted the yoke of Rome thrown off, and when Jesus didn't meet their expectations, the Zealots and others, hey, this is not what we bought in for. That's not what we're in for. When Jesus comes into Jerusalem and rode the same route down the Mount of Olives and rides not on a white horse like Pompey, but rides on a donkey and comes into Jerusalem, what did the people hope for? Now, this is it. This guy can raise the dead. This guy can heal. He makes a little bit of a meal, feed all these people. We know what you're here for. And the very next thing Jesus does on Monday is clean the temple again. Tuesday goes into the temple, great day of questions. Wednesday, we don't know what happened on Wednesday. Thursday, we have the Last Supper in the evening. And then Friday, because a lot of people wanted Jesus to lead this revolt, and when he didn't do it, that turned the crowd against him very, very quickly. All right, these people advocated the violent overthrow of Rome, and they refused to pay taxes to Rome. Uh-oh. That's going to get you in trouble. Do you see the cleverness of the Pharisees and Sadducees and Herodians as they question Jesus? See how clever they are? You imagine matching wits with Jesus. They tried it, so they bring the coin. Should we pay taxes or not? Do you know what's behind that question? You do now, don't you? There's a whole group of Jews that don't pay taxes. The Zealots. And it would take just a little bit of a spark to set those people off. And so here the Pharisees and those who question Jesus are trying to get something going here where he will be discredited no matter what he says. John chapter 8, the woman taken in adultery is thrown at Jesus' feet. What a time and a place, as he's teaching in the temple. And so, now Moses says this. Do you see? Now we know, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they were strict on the Torah. And here, the penalty for this was stoning. Now, Moses says this, what do you say? These guys were clever. They knew, obviously, how the Jews were divided into all these groups, and it took just a little bit of a spark to set it all off. But Jesus never rose to the bait, but he answered their questions. Every time, he answered their questions. They would ask him questions, and I love when Jesus responded on one occasion. Well, now that's a good question. Now I'll ask you a question. John the Baptist. Oh, and there's no answer. If we say this, this. Well, you see all of this trouble brewing from all these groups. Do you remember in the 60s when the Jesus people started up? And the whole hippie kind of thing turned towards Jesus. Everybody, God made man in his image, and then we want to return the favor. Now we'll make you in our image. And so Jesus' ministry has been co-opted by lots of people. I'm not picking on anybody necessarily. Well, yeah, I am. But, so here's Jeremiah Wright. And our president sat under his preaching for 20 plus years. He's a liberation theologian. And he's co-opted the ministry, the message of Jesus. Well, it's all this. It's all about the downtrodden and the most important event in the scriptures, the deliverance from Egypt. And Jesus came to, now, But lots of groups have done that. They've taken the ministry of Jesus and they co-opted and make it fit their temple.
John Birch Society.
Say it again. John Birch Society, exactly right. Exactly right. Well, we're Christians. White supremacist groups. We're Christians. In fact, one's called the Christian Identity Movement. Really? That's Christianity? Well, these zealots, they wanted Jesus to follow their schedule, and of course that, no.
Even the moral majority.
Say it again. Yes.
Even the moral
Yes.
majority.
I'm sorry to say that you're right. That's exactly right.
Either moral or majority.
But it sounded so good.
Like they got the Army of God movement.
Yeah, the Army of God. Exactly. There are all kinds of movements today where Jesus is supposedly followed, and he is not. All right, let's get some more characteristics of these zealots. So we know they're against Rome. They may have been Pharisees who leaned a little more toward the political freedom thing. They wanted Rome overthrown violently if necessary. They wouldn't pay taxes. And they said, if you acknowledge loyalty to Caesar, that is a sin. And they are the ones who brought about the Roman invasion in AD 70. If you want to lay the blame at somebody's feet, Rome finally had enough. And under Titus and Vespasian, father and son team, they came into Rome in AD 70. So the zealots were kind of behind that. Now if you look up Luke 6:15, we meet Simon Zelotes, a disciple of Christ, formerly been a zealot. And you can compare that with Mark 3:18. All right, so we've got the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes and Zealots. Let's go to the Herodians. The Herodians. If we have time tomorrow, and I don't know that we'll have time, I've saved a lecture on the Herods and the Samaritans. If we have time, we'll get to that. If we don't have time, we won't. But if you want to do an interesting study, study the Herods. Years ago I wrote a paper on the Herods, and honestly it was like wading through a sewer. I mean, they were horrible. Well, you know there are 4 Herods mentioned in the Bible, and there are lots and lots of Herods. That's not just a name, it's a title. The Herodians were influential Jews who, they were all about politics. And they supported Roman rule. And their main thought was we need to get along with the Herods. Now I want to pause here for just a minute. Let me write down there Matthew 22:16, the Herodians. The Herodians were Jews who said, you know, we're get along with Rome. It's all politics. This is not a religious group. Can you think of a book in the Bible which describes what's going to happen to the Edomites because of what they did to the Jews when the temple was burned and Jerusalem was burned? Obadiah. Do you remember the movie The Last Crusade? It was one of the Harrison Ford movies where he's, what's his name? Indiana Jones, of course. I kept thinking of the word Hoosier. It's not Hoosier Jones. You remember the scene in The Last Crusade where Harrison Ford and Sean Connery and this group are coming through this real narrow passageway, and all of a sudden they come to this facade that looks like there was a city there? You know that's a real place, right? That's Petra. And it was almost, well, it was pretty easy to defend because they'd have to come in, the enemy'd have to come in this way. But Obadiah gives us some insight into the Edomites. Now we remember the Edomites had a very bad relationship with the Jews, and on the occasion where Obadiah wrote, the Jews, when the temple was burned in Jerusalem, some of them tried to escape. And what did the Edomites do? They'd capture them, turn them over to the Babylonians. Yay! Look at this, Jerusalem went down. And God said, I saw what you did, and you're next. And they were. Now, up in those hills, the Edomites, back there, functioned as a bank. You know, you go to the bank and you pay, what, $10 a month, you get a little box, safety box. Well, Egypt and other nations kept their riches there because up in those hills, The riches were safe, and the people thought they were safe. Well, they weren't, but the point I'm driving at is the Edomites and the Jews, when they hated each other, and the Herods were Edomites. But Rome saw an opportunity to control the Jews and gave them some status, and the Jews who went along with them were called Herodians. All right, let's shift gears and go to the scribes. The scribes. I think I told you there were 6 of these groups. I think there are 7. I think I forgot about the scribes. But the scribes. How many? Where are we at now? Are the scribes 6? Yeah, the scribes are